I never thought I'd be sitting across from my ex-husband in a boardroom, watching the color drain from his face as I slid the acquisition papers toward him. "Sign here, please, Mr. Parker." My voice was steady, my expression neutral. 6 months ago, I was crying on my bathroom floor, staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test while he packed his bags to move in with his secretary. Today, I'm his boss. But let me take you back to where it all began, before my life imploded and rebuilt itself into something stronger than I ever imagined. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The morning sickness hit me like a freight train that Wednesday in April. I had been feeling off for weeks, but I chalked it up to stress from the recent promotion I'd received at Meridian Technologies. The bathroom tiles were cold against my knees as I emptied the contents of my stomach for the 3rd time that morning. When I finally managed to stand, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Pale face, dark circles under my eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Despite looking like death warmed over, I couldn't help but smile. After 3 years of trying, countless doctor appointments, and one devastating miscarriage, I was almost certain I was pregnant. I opened the medicine cabinet and pulled out the pregnancy test I'd been too afraid to take. 15 minutes later, tears of joy streamed down my face as I stared at those 2 pink lines. My hands trembled as I picked up my phone to call my husband, Blake Parker, CEO of Parker Industries. "Hey, this is Blake. Leave a message." Voicemail, again. For the past few months, Blake had been increasingly unavailable, citing a major acquisition he was working on. Late nights at the office, business trips that kept getting extended, missed dinners, and half-hearted apologies had become our routine. Still, I wanted to believe things would get better once the deal went through. And now, with a baby on the way, surely we would find our way back to each other. I decided to surprise him instead. I would go to his office, take him to lunch, and share the news. Maybe this was exactly what we needed. Parker Industries occupied the top 10 floors of a gleaming glass skyscraper downtown. I'd been there dozens of times for company events, but today felt different. The security guard at the front desk, Tom, greeted me with a warm smile. "Mrs. Parker, haven't seen you in a while. Here to see the boss?" "Yes, I thought I'd surprise him for lunch." Tom's smile faltered for just a second. "Let me call up and let them know you're coming." "No need," I said, quickly. I want it to be a surprise. He hesitated, then nodded and swiped my visitor badge. 38th floor. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. My stomach fluttered with both morning sickness and anticipation. I held the small gift bag containing the positive pregnancy test and a tiny pair of baby shoes I'd impulsively purchased. On my way downtown, the reception area of Parker Industries was busy as always. Young professionals moved purposefully through the open-concept space. Modern art adorned the walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of the city. Blake had built this company from the ground up, and despite our recent distance, I was proud of him. Melissa, Blake's longtime assistant, wasn't at her desk. I made my way past it, heading toward Blake's corner office. The frosted glass door was closed, unusual for Blake, who preferred an open-door policy with his employees. I could hear muffled voices inside. I knocked lightly, then turned the handle. The door was unlocked. "Blake, I thought we could—" The words died in my throat. Blake was there, all right. So was Amber Reeves, his newly hired executive assistant. They sprang apart when I entered, but not fast enough to hide what they'd been doing. Amber's blouse was unbuttoned, her lipstick smeared. Blake's tie was loosened, his hair disheveled. There was a champagne bottle chilling in an ice bucket on his desk, 2 glasses already poured. "Olivia?" Blake said, his voice strained. "This isn't—" "Don't," I cut him off, my voice barely a whisper. "Don't you dare say this isn't what it looks like. Amber began hastily buttoning her blouse, her face flushed. "I should go," she murmured, but made no move to leave. "No, stay," I said, my shock giving way to a cold, spreading numbness. "I'm the one interrupting." Blake moved toward me, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Liv, please, we need to talk about this." I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I'd loved for nearly a decade, the man I'd supported through business school, the man whose dreams I'd helped build, the man whose child was growing inside me. He looked back at me with those blue eyes I once found so honest, now filled with guilt and something else. Relief? Was he actually relieved to be caught? "How long?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Blake sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "Olivia, let's not do this here." "How?" "Long. 6 months," Amber answered when Blake wouldn't. She at least had the decency to look ashamed. "It just happened. 6 months. Half a year of lies. All those late nights and business trips suddenly made perfect sense." "Were you ever going to tell me?" I asked Blake, who had the audacity to look annoyed that I was creating a scene in his office. "Of course I was," he said too quickly. "I've been trying to find the right time." A bitter laugh escaped me. "The right time to tell your wife you've been sleeping with your secretary for 6 months? When exactly would that be, Blake? Our anniversary? Next month? Christmas?" Amber flinched at being called a secretary. "I'm the executive assistant to the CEO," she corrected reflexively. I turned to her, this woman who couldn't be more than 25, with her perfect blonde hair and immaculate manicure. "Congratulations on the promotion," I said coldly. Blake stepped between us. "Amber, give us a minute." She nodded, gathering her things and slipping past me out the door. I noticed she was wearing the perfume I'd given Blake for Christmas. The one he'd claimed wasn't his taste. Once we were alone, Blake's demeanor changed. The guilt was still there, but now mixed with impatience. Like I was an inconvenient problem he needed to solve before his next meeting. "I never wanted you to find out this way," he said, straightening his tie and retrieving his suit jacket from the back of his chair. The transformation was remarkable. Within seconds, he'd gone from caught adulterer back to composed CEO. "How exactly did you want me to find out, Blake? A text? Post-it note on the refrigerator?" "I was going to sit you down this weekend," he said, and I could tell he was lying. "Things haven't been right between us for a long time, Olivia. You know that. And your solution was to cheat instead of talking to me about it?" "I tried talking. You were always so wrapped up in your career, your promotion at Meridian. When was the last time you asked about my day? About how the Patterson deal was going?" I stared at him in disbelief. "You're blaming me for your affair?" "I'm not blaming anyone. These things happen. People grow apart." "People grow apart," I repeated, feeling like I was in some kind of twisted dream. "So that justifies betraying your wedding vows?" Blake sighed, checking his watch. "Look, I have a conference call in 15 minutes. Can we continue this at home tonight? I'll explain everything." The casual way he dismissed the destruction of our marriage made something inside me snap. Without thinking, I hurled the gift bag at him. It hit his chest and fell to the floor, the contents spilling out. The positive pregnancy test skittered across the polished hardwood. Blake froze, staring at it. "Is that—" "Yes," I said, tears finally breaking free. "I'm pregnant, Blake. I came here to tell you we're having a baby, and instead I found out my husband is a cheating liar." He picked up the test, his face impossible to read. For a brief, foolish moment, I thought maybe this would change things. Maybe the baby would bring us back together. "Are you sure it's mine?" he asked quietly. The question hit me like a physical blow. In all our years together, through all our fertility struggles, Blake had never once doubted my faithfulness. Now, I understood. His accusation was a projection of his own guilt. "Get out," I whispered, trembling with rage. "This is my office, Olivia! Get out!" I screamed, not caring who heard. "Get out before I throw something much harder than a gift bag." Blake held up his hands in surrender. "Fine, I'll step out. But you need to calm down. Stress isn't good for the baby." His sudden concern for the child he'd just questioned the paternity of was the final insult. As soon as the door closed behind him, I collapsed into his leather chair, my whole body shaking. On his desk was a framed photo of us from our honeymoon in Hawaii, both of us sun-kissed and laughing on the beach. Next to it was a crystal paperweight I'd given him for our 5th anniversary. I grabbed it and hurled it at the wall, watching with satisfaction as it shattered. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The sound brought Blake rushing back in, Amber hovering anxiously. Behind him. "Have you lost your mind?" he demanded, staring at the broken glass. "No," I said, suddenly calm. "But I've lost my husband, apparently." His expression softened marginally. "Liv, we need to talk about this rationally. Think about the baby." "Don't you dare pretend to care about this baby now," I hissed. "You've made your choice, Blake. You chose her." I gestured to Amber, who had the grace to look uncomfortable. Blake's jaw tightened. "This isn't just about Amber. Our marriage has been over for months. We were just going through the motions. Can you honestly say you're happy with me?" I couldn't answer that. The last year had been difficult, certainly. We'd grown distant after the miscarriage. I'd thrown myself into work while Blake had apparently thrown himself into his assistant. But I'd never stopped loving him. Never stopped trying. "I want you gone when I get home," I said, gathering what remained of my dignity. "Pack your things and leave your key." Blake looked genuinely surprised. "You're kicking me out? That's my house, Olivia. My name is on the mortgage." "Both our names are on the mortgage, and I'm not leaving my home while carrying your child." I picked up the tiny baby shoes that had fallen out of the gift bag and placed them on his desk. "You can have a beach house in Naples. It's closer to your girlfriend anyway." Amber stepped forward, her voice tentative. "Actually, Blake's been staying with me for the past few weeks. He already moved most of his essentials." I turned to Blake, fresh pain blooming in my chest. "Weeks? You've been living with her for weeks?" At least he had the decency to look ashamed. "Just on the nights. I told you I was working late. I was going to tell you everything this weekend, I swear." "Save it," I said, heading for the door. "I don't believe a word you say anymore." "Olivia, wait," Blake called after me. "What about the baby? We need to discuss—" "We're not discussing anything right now," I cut him off. "I need time to think." "You can't keep my child from me," he said, a note of warning in his voice. I turned back one last time. "I'm not keeping anyone from anyone. But right now, I need space from you and your executive assistant." The elevator doors couldn't close. Fast enough. As soon as they did, I sagged against the wall, one hand protectively over my still flat stomach. "It's just you and me now, little one," I whispered. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone was buzzing with texts from Blake. "Olivia, please, let's talk about this like adults. I never meant to hurt you. We need to figure out the baby situation. The baby situation. Like our child, it was a problem to be solved." I turned off my phone and stepped out into the bright spring sunshine that seemed to mock my shattered world. Tom, the security guard, took one look at my face and his expression fell. "Mrs. Parker, are you all right? Do you need me to call someone?" I shook my head, unable to speak. How could I explain that in the span of an hour, I'd gone from the happiest moment of my life to the worst? "Would you like me to get you a car?" he asked kindly. I nodded, grateful for this small kindness from a near stranger when my own husband had shown me none. The drive home was a blur. I remember staring out the window at people going about their normal lives, walking dogs, chatting, on phones, carrying shopping bags, and feeling like I was watching scenes from another planet. How could the world still be functioning when mine had just collapsed? Our house, my house now, I supposed, was achingly quiet when I arrived. It was a spacious colonial in an upscale neighborhood, the kind of home meant to be filled with children's laughter. We'd bought it 3 years ago, when we first started trying for a baby. The nursery was still empty, painted a soft yellow after my miscarriage when we couldn't bear to finish decorating it. I walked through each room, taking inventory of what was mine and what was Blake's, only to realize how intertwined our lives had become over 8 years of marriage. The furniture we'd picked out together, the art collected on our travels, the wedding photos smiling down from the walls, all of it suddenly felt like props on a stage, set dressing for a life that had been a lie. In our bedroom, the closet door was open. Half of it was empty, hangers dangling where Blake's suits used to hang. So Amber wasn't lying. He really had been moving out gradually, preparing his exit while I remained oblivious. How had I not noticed? Had I been so wrapped up in my own career that I'd missed the signs of my marriage crumbling? I sat on the edge of the bed, our bed, and finally let the full force of my grief wash over me. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen. I cried for the marriage I thought I had, for the future I'd planned, for the baby who would now be born into a broken home. When I had no tears left, I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger, hollow-eyed and pale, but with a hardness around her mouth that hadn't been there before. I placed both hands on my stomach. "We're going to be okay," I promised my unborn child. "I don't know how, yet, but we will." My phone, which I'd turned back on, chimed with a text message. I expected it to be Blake again, but instead it was from Eleanor Wells, my mentor at Meridian Technologies. "Heard about the Barrett Industries merger with Parker. Everything okay? Call me." My blood ran cold. Barrett Industries was Meridian's biggest competitor, and Parker Industries was in the process of being acquired by them? Blake had never mentioned this. The Patterson deal he'd been working on for months. Had that been a cover story for the Barrett merger? If Barrett acquired Parker, and then went after Meridian as industry rumors suggested they might, my job could be at risk. The job I'd just been promoted in, the job I would need more than ever now that I was going to be a single mother. As I stared at Eleanor's message, another text came through from Blake. "We need to talk about the Barrett deal too. It's happening fast, and there are implications for Meridian. Don't make any rash decisions." The audacity was breathtaking. He was worried I might somehow interfere with his precious merger. After what he'd done, I took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside me. The tears were gone now, replaced by something harder and colder. For the first time that day, my mind cleared and a sense of purpose took hold. Blake had betrayed me personally and was about to betray me professionally. He thought he had all the power, the money, the connections, the upper hand in our divorce. He thought I would fall apart, too emotional and devastated to fight back. He was wrong. I picked up my phone and dialed Eleanor's number. "It's Olivia," I said when she answered. "We need to talk about Barrett Industries and my husband's company. I have information that could change everything." By the time I hung up an hour later, I had a plan. Blake Parker had no idea what was coming. 3 weeks after discovering Blake's affair, I sat in my obstetrician's office, watching the flutter of my baby's heartbeat on the ultrasound monitor. Steady, strong, resilient, everything I needed to be. "Would you like to know the sex?" Dr. Winters asked, moving the wand across my still flat abdomen. I hesitated. Blake and I had always said we wanted to be surprised, but Blake wasn't here. He hadn't even asked about the appointment. Yes, I said firmly. I want to know. It's a girl, she said with a warm smile. Developing perfectly in 12 weeks. A girl. A daughter. Somehow knowing made everything more real, more urgent. I had a daughter to protect now, to provide for, to show how to be strong in the face of betrayal. Thank you, I said, wiping the gel from my stomach. Can I have a picture? Dr. Winters printed several ultrasound images, passing them to me with a sympathetic glance. How are you holding up, Olivia? It's a lot to process. The pregnancy, the separation. News traveled fast in our social circle. Everyone knew about Blake and Amber by now, though the sanitized version Blake's PR team had. Crafted painted it as an amicable split that happened before the affair began. I'm taking it one day at a time, I said, the phrase I'd rehearsed for concerned questions. Focusing on work and the baby. And the father? She asked carefully. Will he be involved? He says he wants to be. Blake had made that abundantly clear in the flurry of texts, emails, and formal letters from his attorney that had followed our confrontation. He wanted joint custody, input on medical decisions, his parental rights firmly established. What he didn't want, apparently, was to actually see me or discuss our shattered marriage. Dr. Winters nodded. Well, remember that stress isn't good for the baby. Whatever happens with your ex, try to maintain a calm environment for yourself. A calm environment? Right. Between the impending divorce, the Barrett-Parker merger rumors swirling through the industry, and the morning sickness that wouldn't quit, calm wasn't exactly an abundant supply. I left the clinic clutching the ultrasound photos. For a moment, I considered texting one to Blake, then decided against it. He didn't deserve this milestone. Not today. Instead, I called the one person who had been my rock through this ordeal. Eleanor? It's me. I just left Dr. Winters. Are you free for lunch? Eleanor Wells wasn't just my mentor at Meridian Technologies. She had become something of a surrogate mother to me since my own parents passed away years ago. At 58, she'd navigated the male-dominated tech industry for decades, shattering glass ceilings and taking no prisoners along the way. When I'd called her that first night after discovering Blake's betrayal, she'd listened without judgment, then immediately shifted into action mode, helping me channel my pain into purpose. We met at Larkspur, a quiet restaurant where the booths were private and the staff discreet. Eleanor was already waiting, her silver hair swept into its usual elegant chignon, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed documents on her tablet. There she is, Eleanor said, standing to embrace me. How did it go? I slid into the booth and passed her an ultrasound photo. I'm having a girl. Eleanor's eyes softened. She's beautiful, Olivia, just like her mother. She studied the image, then looked up with the shrewd expression I knew so well. Have you told Blake? No. And I'm not going to, at least not yet. He hasn't earned the right to this moment. Good, she said, tucking the photo back into its envelope. Now, we have developments on the Barrett front. Their CEO, Michael Hayes, reached out this morning. My heart skipped. To you specifically? That's unusual. Very, especially since the Parker acquisition hasn't been publicly announced. She leaned forward. He wants to meet. Just the three of us. You, me, and him. I nearly choked on my water. Why would the CEO of Barrett Industries want to meet with me? He didn't say, but I have a theory. Eleanor's eyes gleamed. I think your husband might have oversold his knowledge of Meridian's proprietary technology in the acquisition talks. Hayes might be fishing to see what you know. The proprietary AI security architecture I'd helped develop at Meridian was revolutionary. Our competitors, including Barrett, had been trying to replicate it for years without success. If Blake had implied he had insider knowledge through me, that would be corporate espionage, I said, anger flaring. I never discussed the specifics of the Artemis project with Blake. Of course not. You're too professional for that. Eleanor sipped her tea. But Michael Hayes doesn't know that. He only knows that the brilliant lead engineer at Meridian is married to the CEO he's acquiring. Was married. The correction died on my lips as the implications sank in. You think we should take the meeting. I think we should hear what he has to say, Eleanor corrected. Knowledge is power, Olivia. And right now, you need all the power you can get. We spent the rest of lunch strategizing. If Barrett was indeed planning to absorb Meridian after the Parker acquisition, my team's jobs, including my own, could be at risk. The severance would be generous, but with a baby on the way and a divorce to navigate, I couldn't afford to be unemployed. There's another possibility, Eleanor said as we finished our meal. One that might solve several problems at once. I'm listening. What if Meridian acquired Parker Industries instead? I stared at her. We don't have that kind of capital. Not yet. Eleanor's smile was calculating. But if we could prove that Blake endangered the company by promising access to intellectual property he doesn't actually have, the board might see an acquisition as damage control. The idea was audacious, bordering on impossible. Meridian was successful, but Parker Industries was twice our size. Yet the seed was planted, taking root in my mind. I need to think about this, I said as we parted ways outside the restaurant. It's a lot to process. Eleanor squeezed my hand. Of course, but don't take too long. The meeting with Hayes is on Friday. I spent the rest of the afternoon distracted, turning over possibilities in my mind. When I finally arrived home, I was surprised to find Blake's Tesla in the driveway. My stomach tightened as I pulled in beside it. He was waiting on the porch, his suit impeccable as always, hair perfectly styled. Even after everything, the sight of him sent a jolt of complicated emotions through me. Anger, betrayal, and beneath it all, a traitorous flicker of the love I was trying desperately to extinguish. What are you doing here? I asked, keeping my distance. I've been calling you all day, he said, his tone clipped. We have things to discuss. You should have had your lawyer call my lawyer. After our confrontation, I'd immediately retained Patricia Diaz, a divorce attorney known for her ruthless efficiency. Blake had countered with Jeffrey Harmon, a shark from his country club network. This isn't about the divorce. Blake ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of agitation, from someone usually so composed. It's about Barrett. I know Eleanor Wells contacted Michael Hayes. I kept my expression neutral. How would you know that? Because Hayes called me immediately after. Olivia, what are you playing at? I'm not playing at anything. Eleanor is my boss, and Hayes reached out to her. The partial truth was easier than explaining our plan. Why does that concern you? Blake stepped closer, lowering his voice. Because the Barrett deal is delicate right now. If Hayes thinks there's any discord between us that could affect Meridian's cooperation— Discord? I laughed bitterly. Is that what we're calling your affair and our impending divorce? His jaw tightened. This is exactly what I mean. You're emotional and it's clouding your judgment. This deal is worth millions, Olivia. Our daughter's future is at stake. The casual way he dropped "our daughter" made my blood boil. How did you know it's a girl? Blake faltered. Your doctor's office called. There was an insurance issue. Of course, his name was still on my health insurance. Another complication in the tangled web of our separating lives. Blake, I'm tired. I've had a long day, and I really don't want to discuss business on our front porch. Fine. Can I come in? Just for a few minutes. Against my better judgment, I let him in. The house felt different with him in it. Smaller somehow, the air charged with tension. Blake moved through the space with familiar ease, though I noticed his eyes cataloging the changes I'd made. The wedding photos were gone, replaced with abstract art. His books had been boxed up, his favorite whiskey glasses removed from the bar cart. You've been redecorating, he observed, trying for a neutral tone but unable to hide his displeasure. Just making the space more mine. I set my keys on the entry table, keeping my purse with the ultrasound photos close. What did you want to discuss about Barrett? Blake settled on the edge of the sofa, not making himself too comfortable, which I appreciated. Hayes is under the impression that you might have concerns about the acquisition. Did he say why? No. But I know you, Olivia. You're angry with me. You have every right to be. But please don't let that anger sabotage this deal. It's the culmination of everything I've worked for. The audacity was breathtaking. Everything you've worked for, I repeated. What about what I've worked for? My career at Meridian, my team, the Artemis project? That's actually why I'm here. Blake leaned forward, his expression earnest. I've convinced Hayes that keeping Meridian's engineering division intact would be advantageous. Your job would be safe. My job, I said flatly. Are you offering me job security in exchange for not interfering with your deal? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I'm trying to protect both our interests, Liv. The Barrett acquisition is happening whether you like it or not. I'm just trying to minimize the collateral damage. The collateral damage, I echoed. Is that what I am to you now? Blake sighed, running his hand through his hair again. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Look, this tension between us, it isn't good for anyone. Not for you, not for the baby, not for our companies. Our companies. That's rich, Blake. You've never once taken an interest in what I do at Meridian beyond how it might benefit Parker Industries. His expression hardened. That's not true. I've always supported your career. Supported? Yes. Respected? I'm not so sure. I met his gaze directly. Did you promise Hayes access to Meridian's proprietary technology? The flicker in his eyes told me everything. Of course not. That would be illegal. But you implied it. You dangled the possibility. I may have suggested that the merger would create natural synergies between our technologies, he said carefully. Standard acquisition language. Except it's not true. I never shared classified details of Artemis with you, and you know it. Blake stood, his patience visibly fraying. This is exactly why I didn't want to have this conversation in person. You twist everything. I twist everything? I laughed incredulously. That's quite an accusation from someone who's been living a double life for 6 months. This isn't about Amber. It's all about Amber. I snapped, my composure finally cracking. You betrayed me, Blake. You betrayed our marriage. So forgive me if I don't trust you to have my best interests at heart in a business deal that could destroy my career. Blake's phone chimed. He checked it, his expression shifting subtly. I have to go. Let me guess. Amber's waiting. He didn't deny it. We'll finish this discussion another time. Just promise me you won't do anything rash before the Hayes meeting. I don't owe you any promises, I said quietly. After he left, I sat alone in the living room, one hand resting on my stomach. The house felt emptier than before, the ghost of our confrontation lingering in the air. Blake had revealed more than he intended. Hayes was concerned about something, and Blake was worried enough to come here in person. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Just heard from my contact at Barrett. Blake's been summoned to an emergency meeting tonight. Something rattled them. I texted back. Blake was just here, trying to ensure I won't interfere with the deal. Implied my job would be safe if I cooperate. Eleanor's response was immediate, classic, offering crumbs to keep you quiet. What did you tell him? Nothing. But I confirmed he misrepresented his access to Meridian's tech to Hayes. There was a long pause before Eleanor replied. That changes things. Can you prove it? Could I? Blake had been careful not to admit anything outright. But there might be another way. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Tom, the security guard from Parker Industries. We'd always been friendly during my visits, and he'd shown genuine concern the day I discovered Blake's affair. On impulse, I called him. "Mrs. Parker? Is everything okay?" His voice was cautious, surprised. "Tom, I need a favor. It's important." After our brief conversation, I sat back, mind racing. Tomorrow I would meet with Meridian's board chair, the day after with our legal team. By Friday's meeting with Hayes, I needed to be fully prepared. Blake thought he had all the power. He thought he could cheat on me, discard our marriage, and still dictate the terms of both our personal and professional futures. He thought I would accept the crumbs he offered out of fear or gratitude. He had no idea what was coming. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. In the morning, I woke to a flurry of news alerts on my phone. Barrett Industries stock down 7% in pre-market trading. Rumors of insider trading investigation at Parker Industries rattle investors. Barrett-Parker merger timeline, under review, according to sources. My phone rang. Eleanor. "Have you seen the news?" she asked without preamble. "Just the headlines." "What happened?" "Someone leaked emails suggesting Blake Parker misrepresented Meridian's technology in the acquisition talks. Hayes is furious. The Barrett board is nervous, and there's talk of an SEC inquiry." My heart raced. Do they know who leaked the emails? No, but the source is credible. The emails came directly from Blake's server. Tom. The security guard must have come through. I felt a momentary pang of guilt, quickly replaced by righteous satisfaction. Blake had made his bed. Now he could lie in it. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Eleanor said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "We accelerate our plan. The Meridian board just called an emergency meeting. They want both of us there, in an hour." "Both of us? Why me?" "Because, my dear, you're about to become very important to this company's future. How quickly can you get downtown?" As I rushed to dress, my phone lit up with a text from Blake. "What have you done?" I didn't respond. There would be time for explanations later. Right now, I had a meeting to prepare for, a company to save, and a future to secure for my daughter. The game had changed. Blake Parker was about to learn that hell hath no fury like a pregnant woman scorned, especially when that woman holds the keys to his company's future. The Meridian Technologies boardroom was imposing by design. All dark wood, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 14 executives sat around the massive table, their expressions ranging from curious to concerned. At the head sat Richard Caldwell, the 72-year-old board chairman whose silver hair and perpetual scowl had intimidated generations of tech professionals. Eleanor and I had arrived early, reviewing our strategy in hushed tones before the others filed in. Now, as all eyes turned to us, I straightened my spine and tried to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "Mrs. Parker," Caldwell began, his voice gravelly from decades of cigars. "Quite the situation you've found yourself in." "It's Ms. Henderson now," I corrected firmly, reverting to my maiden name. "And yes, it's complicated." "Complicated," he repeated with a dry chuckle. "That's one word for it. Another might be catastrophic. Barrett's stock is down 12%. Since the market opened, Parker Industries isn't faring much better. And Meridian?" He gestured to the tablet in front of him. "We're caught in the crossfire." Eleanor leaned forward. "Which is precisely why we requested this meeting, Richard. Olivia has information that could change everything." Caldwell's bushy eyebrows rose. "We're listening." For the next 20 minutes, I laid out everything. Blake's misrepresentation of his access to Meridian's proprietary technology, the implications for both the Barrett acquisition and our company's future, and most importantly, the opportunity this crisis presented. "The leaked emails have destabilized the Barrett-Parker deal," I concluded. "Their board is nervous, investors are pulling back, and Hayes is looking for someone to blame. This creates a window for us to make a move." "What kind of move?" asked Vanessa Chen, our CFO. Eleanor slid a folder to the center of the table. A counter-acquisition. Meridian acquires Parker Industries instead of Barrett. The room erupted in murmurs. Caldwell silenced them with a raised hand. That's ambitious. Eleanor. Some might say delusional. Parker is twice our size. By market cap, yes, Eleanor agreed. But their valuation is plummeting as we speak. Meanwhile, the Artemis project has positioned Meridian as a leader in AI security. Our stock is holding steady despite the market turbulence. Parker wouldn't agree to it, said Marcus Webb, our head of legal. Blake Parker would rather sink his own company than sell to us, especially now. I cleared my throat. Blake might not have a choice. The SEC investigation into these leaked emails could force a leadership change. And as a major shareholder, I have certain rights. This revelation caused another stir. Few people knew that I owned nearly 6% of Parker Industries, shares Blake had transferred to me years ago for tax purposes, never imagining they might someday be used against him. Even with your shares, you don't have controlling interest, Caldwell pointed out. No, I agreed. But combined with other sympathetic shareholders, we could form a voting bloc strong enough to sway the board. The meeting continued for another hour, the conversation shifting from skepticism to strategic planning. By the time we adjourned, a tentative plan was in place. Meridian would quietly position itself for a hostile takeover, while the Parker-Barrett deal unraveled. This won't be easy, Caldwell warned as we prepared to leave. If Blake Parker catches wind of what we're planning, he'll fight back with everything he has. I'm counting on it, I said quietly. Eleanor and I exited the building through a side entrance, avoiding the business reporters who had begun to gather at the main lobby. My phone, which I'd silenced during the meeting, showed 15 missed calls from Blake and one text message, emergency board meeting at Parker Industries. They know it was you who leaked the emails. This is war, Olivia. I showed the text to Eleanor, who frowned. He's bluffing. There's no way they could trace the leak back to you, unless Tom had talked. The security guard had been eager to help, especially after I hinted that Blake's affair might not have been his only ethical lapse. But if pressure was applied... I need to warn Tom, I said, dialing his number. The call went straight to voicemail. Too late, said a voice behind us. I whirled to find Blake standing there, looking disheveled in a way I'd never seen before. Tie loosened, hair mussed, dark circles under his eyes. He must have been waiting for us to emerge. Blake, I acknowledged. Coolly. Shouldn't you be at your emergency board meeting? It ended early when security footage showed Tom Alvarez accessing my private server after hours. Interesting timing, wouldn't you say? Right after a call from my estranged wife. Eleanor stepped between us. This conversation should happen with lawyers present, Blake. He ignored her, his eyes locked on mine. You're trying to destroy me because I hurt you. I get it. I deserve some of it. But this? Corporate espionage? You could go to jail, Olivia. Espionage implies I took something that wasn't mine, I replied evenly. All Tom did was confirm what I already suspected, that you misrepresented your access to Meridian's technology. That's fraud, Blake. Should we discuss which of us is more likely to see the inside of a prison cell? His face paled. What do you want? To ruin me professionally because our marriage failed? To punish me for moving on with Amber? Moving on? I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call sneaking around behind my back for 6 months? And no, I don't want to ruin you. I want to protect my company, my team, and my future. The future of our daughter. Blake's expression shifted at the mention of the baby. For a moment, something that might have been genuine regret flashed in his eyes. Liv, please, let's not do this. Not like this. Whatever you think of me as a husband, I'm going to be a father. This scorched earth approach hurts everyone, including our child. Don't you dare use our daughter as a shield, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You forfeited the right to take the moral high ground the minute you started sleeping with your assistant. She's not just my assistant, Blake said defensively. Amber and I, save it. I cut him off. I don't care about your relationship with Amber. What I care about is that you were willing to sacrifice Meridian, my career, my team's livelihoods, to salvage your deal with Barrett. That tells me everything I need to know about your priorities, Eleanor. Touched my arm gently. We should go, Olivia. This isn't productive. Blake's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. Fine. Go. But this isn't over. The Parker board is meeting again tomorrow morning. I've already told them about your shares. They're preparing to contest any attempt at a proxy. Fight! Then I guess we'll see each other in the boardroom, I said, turning away. As Eleanor drove us back to Meridian, I finally let my composure crack. Tom could lose his job because of me. He was just trying to help. He knew the risks, Eleanor said pragmatically. And Blake is bluffing about pressing charges. He can't afford the scrutiny of a legal battle right now, not with the SEC already. Sniffing around. She was right, but it didn't ease my guilt. What's our next move? We need allies at Parker Industries. Not everyone on that board is loyal to Blake, especially now that his leadership has put the company in jeopardy, I thought for a moment. David Russo. He's been on the Parker board for 20 years, since Blake's father was CEO. He never fully warmed to Blake taking over. Eleanor nodded. Perfect. Can you arrange a meeting? I think so. He was always kind to me at company events. Said I reminded him of his daughter. By the time we returned to Meridian, news of the Barrett-Parker deal's troubles had dominated the business headlines. Rumors and speculation were running wild, some close to the truth, others wildly off base. Our PR team had already prepared a statement emphasizing Meridian's stability and commitment to its employees and shareholders. I spent the afternoon calling Parker Industries board members, starting with David Russo. Most didn't return my calls, but David agreed to meet for coffee that evening. He sounded tired, wary, but willing to listen. We met at a quiet cafe near his home in the suburbs, far from the corporate hubs where we might be recognized. David was already waiting when I arrived, his distinguished silver hair and round glasses making him easy to spot. Olivia, he greeted me, standing politely. You're looking well, despite everything. Thank you for meeting me, David. I know it's an awkward position. He gestured for me to sit. Awkward doesn't begin to cover it. I've known you since Blake first brought you home, watched your marriage from the beginning, and now this. He sighed heavily. Corporate politics I can handle. Family drama is another matter entirely. I'm not here to discuss my marriage. I said gently, though I appreciate your concern. Then why are you here? His gaze was shrewd, assessing. The timing of these leaked emails, coming right as you and Blake are separating, it raised eyebrows. I met his eyes directly. Did Blake tell the board about promising Hayes access to Meridian's proprietary technology? David's silence was enough. That's what I thought, I continued. David, I've respected you since the day we met. You helped build Parker Industries into what it is today. That's why I think you deserve to know the truth. Blake was willing to compromise not just my company, but Parker's legal standing to make this deal happen. These are serious accusations, Olivia. They're not accusations. They're facts, confirmed by the emails Tom retrieved. I leaned forward. The Barrett deal is toxic now. The SEC investigation won't just go away, and Blake's leadership has put the company at risk. David removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. What are you suggesting? Meridian is preparing a counteroffer. We want to acquire Parker Industries. He let out a short, surprised laugh. Ambitious, but Blake would never allow it. Blake may not have a choice. Between my shares and those of sympathetic board members, like me, you mean? He wasn't asking. I nodded. Like you. The Parker legacy deserves better than to end in an SEC investigation and a failed merger. David was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup slowly between his fingers. Blake's father was my best friend. When he died, I promised to look after both his son and his company. Lately, I felt like I've failed at both. He looked up at me. Blake was devastated when you lost the baby last year. He didn't know how to handle it, withdrew into himself. I'm not excusing what he did with this Amber woman, but I appreciate what you're trying to do, I interrupted gently. But this isn't about the affair, not really. It's about Blake's judgment as CEO. You know as well as I do that the Barrett deal was rushed, the due diligence incomplete. Now we know why. He was promising them access he didn't have. David sighed deeply. The board meets tomorrow at 9. I can't promise anything, but I'll listen to what Blake has to say with new perspective. It wasn't a firm commitment, but it was something. As we parted ways, David paused. Olivia, I heard about the baby. Congratulations. Blake's father would have been thrilled to have a granddaughter. The mention of Blake's father, a kind man who had welcomed me into the family with open arms, brought an unexpected lump to my throat. Thank you, David. The next morning dawned with more turmoil. Barrett Industries had officially announced they were reconsidering the acquisition timeline. Parker's stock had dropped another 8% in pre-market trading, and Blake had filed an emergency motion to prevent me from voting my Parker shares, claiming conflict of interest. Eleanor called as I was getting dressed for the Meridian board meeting. Hayes just reached out. He still wants to meet tomorrow, but he's bringing his general counsel. So it's gone from a friendly chat to a legal showdown, I observed, settling on a charcoal gray maternity suit that managed to look both professional and confident. Precisely, and our team just got word. Parker's board meeting ended in chaos. 3 directors walked out, including David Russo. My heart leaped. Walked out in protest? Apparently. Blake tried to force a vote reaffirming the Barrett deal. Despite the SEC concerns, Russo and the others refused. This was the break we needed. Without a unified board behind him, Blake's position was weakening by the hour. The Meridian Emergency Board meeting was brief but decisive. The consensus was clear. We would move forward with preparations for a hostile takeover of Parker Industries. Our legal team would counter Blake's motion to block my shares, and our finance team would begin approaching key investors for support. As the meeting adjourned, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. This is Amber. We need to talk. Can we meet privately? I stared at the message in disbelief. Amber Reeves, Blake's mistress-turned-girlfriend, wanted to meet? It had to be a trap. I showed the text to Eleanor, who frowned. Blake's probably using her to get information. Ignore it. But curiosity gnawed at me. What could Amber possibly want? To apologize? Unlikely. To threaten me? With what? Against my better judgment, I replied, "What about?" The response came quickly. Something I found in Blake's private files. Something about Meridian that you need to see. Now I was intrigued. What do you think? I asked Eleanor. She considered it for a moment. Meet her in a public place. Take Marcus from legal with you. Don't tell her he's coming until you're there. We arranged to meet Amber at a busy restaurant downtown, the kind of place where business lunches happened at tables spaced far enough, apart for privacy. I arrived early with Marcus, securing a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. Amber arrived precisely on time, looking immaculate in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her makeup flawless. She faltered briefly when she saw I wasn't alone, but recovered quickly. Ms. Henderson, she greeted me formally, sliding into the seat across from me. I didn't realize you'd be bringing company. This is Marcus Webb, Meridian's chief legal counsel, I said, not apologizing. Whatever you have to say to me, you can say in front of him. Amber assessed Marcus with a quick glance, then nodded. Fine. This concerns legal matters anyway. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a USB drive, placing it carefully on the table between us. 3 days ago, I found this in Blake's home office. It contains files he downloaded from Meridian's servers during your marriage. My blood ran cold. That's impossible. Blake never had access to— He used your login credentials, Amber interrupted. Apparently you saved them on your home computer. He's had access to Meridian's internal systems for years. Marcus leaned forward. Ms. Reeves, are you admitting that Blake Parker committed corporate espionage against Meridian Technologies? Amber's perfect composure slipped, just slightly. I'm not admitting anything. I'm providing information that may be relevant to Ms. Henderson's situation. Why? I asked bluntly. Why would you help me against Blake? You're with him now. Something flickered in her eyes. Hurt, anger, resolution. Let's just say my relationship with Blake has evolved since you found us together. I recently discovered I'm not the only extracurricular activity he's been enjoying. Blake had cheated on his mistress just as he'd cheated on his wife. There was a certain poetic justice to it. The information on this drive proves Blake accessed Meridian's secure servers without authorization, Amber continued. It also contains the original drafts of the emails he sent Hayes, promising access to technology he knew he couldn't deliver. Marcus looked at me, his expression grave but excited. This was the smoking gun we needed, not just to block the Barrett deal, but potentially to force Blake out entirely. Why should we trust you? I asked Amber. This could be altered or fabricated. Evidence. It's not, she said simply. And you don't have to trust me. The timestamps, digital signatures, and access logs will speak for themselves. Blake betrayed both of us, Olivia. The difference is, I'm doing something about it. As Amber stood to leave, she paused, her hand resting lightly on her stomach in a gesture I recognized all too well. One more thing. I'm pregnant too. 6 weeks. Her smile was brittle. Congratulations on your daughter. I hope Blake proves to be a better father than he was a husband, or boyfriend. She walked away, her head high, leaving the USB drive on the table between us like a live grenade. Marcus whistled low. Well, that just changed everything. Indeed it had. By the time I returned to Meridian with the drive, our cybersecurity team was already analyzing its contents. The evidence was damning and, more importantly, authentic. Blake had used my credentials to access confidential Meridian data, then leveraged that stolen information to sweeten the Barrett deal. As news of this new development spread through both companies, the power shifted dramatically. Parker's board called an emergency session to discuss Blake's future. Barrett officially pulled out of acquisition talks, and Meridian, positioned perfectly as the wounded party, began formal proceedings to acquire our suddenly vulnerable competitor. By sunset, Blake Parker, the man who had betrayed me personally and professionally, was facing not just the collapse of his marriage, but the end of his career. The board had voted to place him on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. His company was in freefall. And I, the woman he had discarded so casually, now held his fate in my hands. The irony wasn't lost on me. 6 weeks ago, I had been the one blindsided, betrayed, facing an uncertain future. Now it was Blake who didn't know what tomorrow would bring. As I left the office that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from him. This has gone far enough. We need to talk. Please. For our daughter's sake, if nothing else. I placed my hand on my growing belly, feeling the slight flutter that had recently begun, my daughter making her presence known. She deserved better than a father who used her as leverage in a corporate war, better than parents locked in eternal conflict. But she also deserved a mother who stood her ground, who fought for what was right, who showed her that betrayal had consequences. Tomorrow, at 9 a.m., I replied. Bring your lawyer. I arrived at my office an hour early, needing time to center myself before facing Blake. The sun was just beginning to illuminate the downtown skyline, casting long shadows across my Desk. I stood at the window, watching the city wake up while absently tracing circles on my growing belly. At 20 weeks, I couldn't hide the pregnancy anymore. Not that I wanted to. This baby was mine, regardless of her father's actions. Patricia. Diaz, my divorce attorney, arrived first. She was a force of nature in a tailored navy suit, her dark hair streaked with silver, her handshake firm and confident. "How are you holding up?" she asked, arranging her files meticulously on the conference table. "Better than expected," I admitted, though I still can't quite believe how quickly everything has changed. That's often how it goes. Months of tension, then everything breaks at once. She examined me with shrewd eyes. "You're sure you want this meeting? We could handle Blake and his attorney without you present." "I need to be here," I said firmly. "This isn't just about the divorce or the corporate takeover. It's about finally getting honesty from a man who's been lying to me for years." Patricia nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Just remember, no matter what he says, don't react emotionally. That's what he'll be expecting. That's what he'll use against you." Marcus Webb from Meridian's legal team arrived next, followed by Eleanor. By the time Blake and his attorney, Jeffrey Harmon, entered the conference room, we presented a united front, 4 professionals facing down the man who had once seemed untouchable. Blake looked terrible. His designer suit hung slightly, loose, as if he'd lost weight. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually impeccable hair needed a trim. Despite myself, I felt a flicker of satisfaction at his disheveled appearance. "Let him lose sleep for a change. Olivia." He nodded stiffly, before acknowledging the others. "Quite the welcoming committee. Ms. Henderson has extensive support, both personally and professionally," Patricia responded smoothly. "Shall we begin?" For the next hour, we outlined the terms that would end both our marriage and the corporate battle simultaneously. Blake would step down as CEO of Parker Industries, accepting a generous but non-controlling position on the board. He would not contest the Meridian acquisition. In exchange, he would receive fair value for his shares and avoid criminal charges for the corporate espionage revealed on Amber's USB drive. As Patricia detailed the divorce settlement, including child custody arrangements, Blake's jaw tightened visibly. "Supervised visitation?" he finally interrupted. "That's insulting. I would never harm my own child." "Given your demonstrated pattern of deception, we feel this is appropriate, at least initially," Patricia replied calmly. "This is vindictive." "Olivia, and you know it," Blake said, turning to me directly for the first time. "Using our daughter to punish me." Something in me snapped. After weeks of careful strategy and professional composure, I'd finally reached my limit. "You don't get to play the victim here, Blake. Not after what you've done." My voice remained steady, but there was an edge to it that made everyone in the room sit straighter. "This isn't about punishment. It's about protection. For our daughter, for me, for the companies you were willing to compromise for your own ambition." "My ambition?" He laughed bitterly. "That's rich, coming from the woman orchestrating a hostile takeover." "A takeover made necessary by your actions," I countered. "You stole proprietary information from my company using my credentials. You promised Barrett access to technology that wasn't yours to give. You betrayed not just me, but everyone who trusted you as CEO." Blake's lawyer placed a warning hand on his arm, but he shook it off. "You want to talk about betrayal? Fine. Let's talk about how you turned my own board against me. How you manipulated David Russo, a man who's known me since childhood. How you conspired with my girlfriend to destroy my career." "Amber came to me," I corrected. "Because you betrayed her too. Seems to be a pattern with you." Blake leaned forward, eyes flashing. "And what about your patterns, Olivia? The way you always played the victim in our marriage. The way you withdrew after the miscarriage, throwing yourself into work instead of dealing with our loss together. The mention of our lost baby sent a jolt of pain through me. Eleanor shifted protectively beside me, but I raised a hand to stop her intervention. You want to go there? Really? I asked quietly. You want to talk about the miscarriage? Because I remember it very differently, Blake. The room fell silent, as tension crackled between us. Blake's attorney tried again to redirect the conversation, but Blake waved him off. Go ahead, he challenged. Tell me your version. I took a deep breath, acutely aware of our audience, but too far gone to care. I remember lying in a hospital bed, bleeding and terrified, while you checked emails on your phone. I remember coming home to an empty house because you had an unavoidable business dinner. I remember crying myself to sleep night after night while you worked late, though now I wonder if you were really working, or if Amber wasn't the first. Blake had the grace to look away, his jaw working. That's not fair. I was dealing with the loss in my own way. By abandoning me when I needed you most? By making me feel like my grief was an inconvenience to your schedule? My voice nearly broke, but I forced myself to continue. I didn't withdraw from you, Blake. You weren't there to withdraw from. His lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should take a brief recess. No, Blake interrupted, his voice suddenly tired. No more delays, no more games. He turned to me, something like resignation in his eyes. You're right. I wasn't there for you after the miscarriage. I couldn't handle seeing you in that much pain. It was the first genuine admission he'd made, and it caught me off guard. For a moment, I glimpsed the man I'd once loved. Vulnerable, human, flawed. That still doesn't excuse what came after, I said, my tone softer but no less resolute. No, he agreed quietly. It doesn't. A heavy silence fell over the room. Patricia exchanged glances with Blake's attorney, who nodded slightly. Perhaps Ms. Henderson and Mr. Parker would benefit from a few minutes of private conversation, she suggested, gathering her papers. We can resume the formal negotiations afterward. Part of me wanted to refuse, to maintain the professional buffer between us. But another part, the part that had shared 8 years of marriage with this man, needed closure that legal documents couldn't provide. 10 minutes, I agreed. Once we were alone, Blake seemed to deflate, rubbing his hands over his face in a gesture of exhaustion. I never wanted it to come to this, Liv. Then why did you let it? I asked simply. He sighed, staring out at the city skyline. Do you remember when we first met? That fundraiser at the art museum? I nodded, the memory surprisingly clear despite everything that had happened since. You were there with your father. I was interning at the Hansen Gallery, passing hors d'oeuvres. Dad. Noticed you before I did, Blake said with a faint smile. He elbowed me and said, That young woman is going places, smart eyes. He was right. Why are you bringing this up now? Blake turned to face me. Because that night changed everything for me. You weren't impressed by my name or my father's money. You challenged me, made me work for your attention. No one had ever done that before. Is that why you married me? Because it was a challenge? The thought was depressing. No, he said quietly. I married you because you made me want to be better. You saw potential in me that even my father missed. I swallowed hard against unexpected emotion. Then why, Blake? Why throw it all away with Amber? With the others? He flinched at the confirmation that I knew about his multiple infidelities. I wish I had a better answer. The truth is, after Dad died, after I took over the company, the pressure was immense. His shadow was everywhere. The board, the investors, the media, they were all watching, waiting for me to fail. So you sought validation elsewhere, I said flatly. In the arms of women who weren't challenging you to be better. That's part of it, he admitted. With them, I could be the confident CEO, the successful son who'd taken over the family business. With you knew all my insecurities, all my fears. You knew I was terrified of letting everyone down. And that justified betraying me? No, he said quickly. Nothing justifies what I did to you, Olivia. I'm just trying to explain, not excuse. I studied him, this man I'd once known better than anyone. When did it start? Really start? I deserve the truth, Blake. He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. 3 months after Dad died, the pressure at work was crushing. We were fighting all the time about whether to start trying for a baby. I went to a conference in Chicago and it just happened. It didn't just happen, I said sharply. You made choices, multiple times. You're right. He looked down at his hands. I made choices. Bad ones, selfish ones. For years, I'd put Blade on a pedestal, believing in him even when the evidence of his flaws mounted. Even after discovering his affair with Amber, a part of me had held on to the image of the man I thought I'd married. Now, hearing him acknowledge his selfishness without excuses, that final illusion shattered. I need to ask you something, I said, my voice steady. And I need you to be completely honest. Did you ever really love me? Or was I just convenient? The supportive wife, the accomplished professional you could show off at company events? Blake looked genuinely pained. Of course I loved you, Liv. I still do in my way. But love isn't enough when you don't like yourself. He sighed. My father built Parker Industries from nothing. He was a giant. I've spent my entire career trying to measure up, knowing I never could. When things got hard between us, it was easier to look for comfort somewhere else than to admit I was failing at marriage, too. Something about his vulnerability, his honesty about his own weaknesses, touched a place in me I'd thought was beyond reach. Not enough to forgive or forget, but enough to see him as a complete person rather than the monster I'd painted in my mind. I'm sorry about your father, I said softly. He was a good man. But you're right. His shadow was always there between us. I just didn't realize how much it was crushing you. Blake glanced at me, surprise evident in his eyes. You're apologizing to me? After everything? I'm acknowledging my part in not seeing how much you were struggling, I clarified. That doesn't excuse your choices, but maybe it helps explain them. He was quiet for a long moment. What happens now, Olivia? With the companies? With our daughter? I placed a hand on my stomach, feeling a small flutter of movement. Meridian will acquire Parker Industries. That's non-negotiable at this point. The board has lost confidence in your leadership, and the SEC investigation isn't going away. And us? Our daughter? There is no us anymore, Blake. You've made that abundantly clear with your actions. I took a deep breath. As for our daughter, I won't keep her from you. Despite everything, you're her father. But trust has to be rebuilt. Supervised visitation is where we start, not where we end. Blake nodded slowly, accepting the finality in my voice. I heard about Amber, he said quietly. About the baby. I assumed you knew. Not until yesterday. She's refusing to speak to me. A bitter smile crossed his lips. Karma, I suppose. What will you do? He shrugged helplessly. Try to be a better father than I was a husband, to both children. He hesitated, then added, I know you have no reason to believe me, but I want you to know. I never meant for any of this to happen. The affair with Amber, the corporate espionage, the lies. Each step seemed small at the time, manageable. Before I knew it, I was drowning in deception. I studied him, noting the genuine regret in his eyes. That's the thing about choices, Blake. We make them individually, but we have to live with their collective weight. Our 10 minutes were nearly up. Soon our lawyers would return, and we'd resume the formal negotiations that would legally untangle our lives. But in this moment of relative privacy, I felt compelled to ask one final question. If you could go back, do it all differently, would you? Blake considered this seriously. Yes, he said finally. but not in the way you might think. I wouldn't just avoid the affairs or the corporate mistakes. I would have been honest. With you, with my father, with myself, about who I really am and what I really want. Maybe then I wouldn't have spent my life trying to fill someone else's shoes. There was a knock at the door, signaling our time was up. As our respective teams filed back in, Blake turned to me one last time. For what it's worth, Olivia, you're going to be an incredible mother and an incredible CEO. You always were stronger than me. The negotiations resumed with a different tone, less combative, more pragmatic. By the end of the day, we had outlined agreements that would reshape both our personal and professional futures. Blake would resign as CEO but retain a board position, with limited voting rights. The Meridian acquisition would proceed with minimal disruption to Parker's employees, and our divorce would move forward with clear custody arrangements for our daughter. As the meeting concluded, Blake paused at the door. Olivia, there's one more thing you should know. About your father. I was tense. My father had died when I was in college before I met Blake. He rarely came up in conversation. What about him? The summer after we got engaged, he came to see my father. Apparently, he was in financial trouble, serious trouble. He asked Dad for a loan. My breath caught. I never knew that. Dad helped him, but not with a loan. He offered him a consulting contract with Parker Industries. Said your father had valuable expertise. Blake's expression softened. After your father died, I found the paperwork in Dad's files. There was no consulting work. Dad was just helping him save face while giving him the money he needed. The revelation hit me hard. My father, proud and accomplished, had been secretly struggling while maintaining a perfect facade. Like father, like daughter, I'd spent years presenting a flawless image to the world while my marriage crumbled behind closed doors. Why tell me this now? I asked. Blake shrugged. Because I realized something during all this chaos. We're all just trying our best, failing sometimes, pretending we know what we're doing. Your father did it. My father did it. I've been doing it my entire career. Maybe the real strength is in admitting when we need help. As he walked away, I remained at the conference table, processing everything that had been revealed. The past we thought we knew, the narratives we'd constructed, they were all more complicated than they appeared. Eleanor returned, finding me lost in thought. Are you okay? She asked gently. I think I will be, I said, surprised to find I meant it. For the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm seeing things clearly. The truth about my father, about Blake's insecurities, about our shared history. It didn't change the facts of our present situation, but somehow, understanding the past made the path forward clearer. Not easier, necessarily, but clearer. I gathered my things to leave. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Winter's office confirming my upcoming ultrasound. At that moment, I made a decision. The cycle of secrets and deception would end with me. My daughter deserved honesty, even when it was difficult. She deserved to know her history, all of it, the good and the bad. And so did I. The boardroom at Barrett Industries was intimidating by design. All sharp angles, black glass, and steel. The kind of room meant to make visitors feel small and insignificant. I refused to be either. At 30 weeks pregnant, I'd grown accustomed to people underestimating me, their eyes lingering on my belly before meeting mine. Michael Hayes, Barrett's CEO, was no exception. As I entered the room alongside Eleanor and our legal team, his gaze dropped briefly to my stomach, surprise flickering across his features before he masked it with a practiced smile. Ms. Henderson, he greeted, extending his hand. Thank you. For coming, I admit I wasn't sure you would. Mr. Hayes, I replied, my grip firm. Given the circumstances, I believe we have much to discuss. The circumstances he referred to were seismic. In the 3 weeks since my confrontation with Blake, the business landscape had transformed dramatically. Blake had resigned as CEO of Parker Industries. The SEC investigation had expanded to include several Parker board members, and our acquisition plan had gained unstoppable momentum. Today's meeting wasn't about whether Meridian would acquire Parker, but what role, if any, Barrett might play in the restructured company. Hayes motioned toward the conference table. "Please make yourselves comfortable. Can I offer you anything? Water? Coffee?" "Water would be fine," I said, taking a seat directly across from him. Once everyone was settled, Eleanor and Marcus Webb, flanking me, Hayes with his CFO and general counsel opposite, Hayes leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "I'll be direct, Ms. Henderson. The Parker acquisition has been a disaster for Barrett. Our stock is down 20%. Shareholders are demanding answers, and the SEC is asking uncomfortable questions about what we knew and when we knew it." "Sounds like you backed the wrong horse," Eleanor observed coolly. Hayes's smile tightened. "Perhaps. Or perhaps we were misled about certain relationships. If you're suggesting I orchestrated this situation, Mr. Hayes," I began. "Not at all," he interrupted smoothly. "In fact, I have considerable respect for how you've handled yourself, which is why I'm here to propose a partnership rather than continued opposition." I exchanged glances with Eleanor. This was unexpected. "I'm listening," I said cautiously. "Barrett has resources Meridian needs: global distribution networks, manufacturing, facilities, capital for expansion. Rather than fight your acquisition of Parker, we'd like to invest, become a significant minority shareholder in the combined entity." Marcus shifted beside me. "With what conditions?" Hayes spread his hands in a gesture of openness. 3 board seats, a non-compete agreement protecting our consumer division, and—" He hesitated, glancing at his general counsel, who nodded slightly. "And a guaranteed position for Blake Parker in the new organization." I kept my expression neutral, though internally I was reeling. "Blake? Why would that matter to Barrett?" "Insurance," Hayes said bluntly. "Despite everything, Blake still has relationships with key Parker clients. Having him on board, even in a reduced capacity, would smooth the transition and prevent competitors from poaching those clients." "Blake is currently under SEC investigation," I pointed out. "His involvement could taint the entire acquisition." "The investigation will resolve," Hayes said with the confidence of someone used to legal problems, disappearing. "And when it does, having Blake in the fold will be an asset, not a liability." I sat back, one hand resting protectively on my stomach as I considered his proposal. On the surface, it made business sense. Barrett's resources would accelerate our global expansion plans. Their distribution network would solve one of our most pressing challenges, and their capital infusion would ease the financial strain of the acquisition. But there was something in Hayes's expression, a calculating gleam, a hint of satisfaction, that set alarm bells ringing. "Why now?" I asked. 3 weeks ago, you were ready to sue Blake Parker for misrepresentation. Now you want to invest in his company's acquirer and guarantee him a position?" Hayes's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's just say new information has come to light that changes our perspective." "What information?" He glanced at his general counsel, who slid a folder across the table. "A series of communications between Blake Parker and Amber Reeves discussing Meridian's intellectual property, communications that continued after she allegedly turned on him." I opened the folder with steady hands, though my heart rate had accelerated. Inside were printouts of text messages and emails between Blake and Amber spanning the past month, including the period after she had supposedly betrayed him by giving me the USB drive. "These suggest that Ms. Reeves's apparent betrayal was orchestrated," Hayes continued. "A ploy to make you trust information that was, shall we say, selectively edited." I scanned the messages, my mind racing. If these were authentic, they indicated that Blake and Amber had been working together all along. The USB drive, the leaked emails, her pregnancy announcement, all part of an elaborate scheme to manipulate me and, by extension, the Meridian. Bored. "Why show me this?" I asked, closing the folder. "If this is true, it's damaging to Blake, not to me or Meridian." Hayes leaned forward. "Because, Ms. Henderson, I respect worthy opponents, and because this information came with a proposal. From Blake himself, one that involves all three of our companies." He outlined Blake's proposal, a three-way merger that would keep Parker Industries intact as a subsidiary, with Blake returning as its CEO. Meridian would lead the combined enterprise's technological development, while Barrett would handle global distribution and manufacturing. On paper, it was elegant, a solution that gave each party what they wanted most. "And if I refuse?" I asked. "Then these communications become part of the public record," Hayes said simply. "The narrative shifts from betrayed wife brilliantly, outmaneuvers cheating husband to corporate power struggle involves elaborate deception on all sides. The SEC investigation expands to include Meridian, and the acquisition becomes mired in litigation for years. It was blackmail, pure and simple. Though they were framing it as a business proposal, the threat was clear. Cooperate or we'll destroy everything you've built." "I'll need time to consider this," I said, rising from my seat. "And to verify the authenticity of these communications." Hayes nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Of course. Take 24 hours, but no more. This situation requires resolution before the markets open on Monday." As we left Barrett's headquarters, Eleanor was uncharacteristically quiet. It wasn't until we were safely in her car, driving back to Meridian, that she spoke. "Do you think they're real? The messages?" I stared out the window at the passing cityscape. "I don't know. They look authentic, but they could be fabricated. And if they're real?" I turned to her. "Then Blake and Amber played me perfectly. They used my anger, my hurt, to manipulate me into exactly the position they wanted." Eleanor's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Which makes no sense. Blake was on the verge of losing everything. Why orchestrate his own downfall?" "Unless it wasn't a downfall," I said slowly, the pieces clicking into place. "Unless this was the plan all along, to force a three-way merger. That would be impossible under normal circumstances. Barrett wanted Parker's client list, but couldn't afford a full acquisition. Parker needed Barrett's global reach, but didn't want to be absorbed. And Meridian had the technology both coveted. So Blake sacrificed his marriage and risked his reputation for a business deal." Eleanor sounded skeptical. "For control," I corrected. "In Hayes' scenario, Blake remains CEO of Parker, which becomes the client-facing division of a global enterprise. He gets to step out of his father's shadow without losing his position. It's exactly what he's always wanted." We drove in silence for several minutes, the implications sinking in. If I was right, Blake had orchestrated the most elaborate corporate chess game imaginable, using his own personal life, our marriage, my pregnancy, even Amber, as pawns. "What will you do?" Eleanor asked as we pulled into Meridian's parking. "Garage." I took a deep breath, my hand resting on my belly where my daughter was particularly active today, as if sensing my distress. "I need to talk to Blake, alone." Eleanor frowned. "That's exactly what they want." "I know, but I need to hear it from him. I need to look him in the eye when he explains using our marriage, our child, as leverage in a business negotiation." Despite Eleanor's protests, I called Blake from my office. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting for my call. "Olivia," he said, his voice neutral. "I assume Hayes shared my proposal." "He did, along with some interesting communications between you and Amber." Blake was silent for a moment. "I'd prefer to discuss this in person." "Fine. My house, 7 o'clock. I spent the intervening hours preparing. Not by reviewing financial documents or consulting with lawyers, but by centering myself, clarifying what I truly wanted, not just for Meridian or for myself, but for my daughter. Blake arrived punctually, looking more like his old self than he had in our previous meeting. Confident, polished, in control. I let him in without a word, leading him to the living room where I'd once envisioned raising our family. "Would you like something to drink?" I asked automatically, the habits of hospitality ingrained despite everything. "No, thank you." He remained, standing, hands in his pockets. "Hayes told me he showed you the messages." "Yes. Are they real, Blake?" He maintained eye contact, unflinching. "Yes and no. The communications are authentic, but their context has been selectively presented." "Explain." Blake sighed, finally taking a seat. "After you discovered us, Amber was genuinely distraught. She hadn't known I was married." "That's impossible," I interrupted. "She worked as your executive assistant for months." "I told her we were separated," he admitted, "that the divorce was being finalized. When she learned the truth, when she saw you that day in my office, she was devastated. The USB drive, the information she gave you, that was all real. She wanted to hurt me as much as I'd hurt both of you. But the messages were from after," he continued. "Once the SEC investigation began, once my position at Parker was compromised, Hayes reached out to Amber directly, offered her a substantial sum to cooperate in what he called a strategy reset. She contacted me, not out of loyalty, but out of self-preservation. She's pregnant, Olivia. She needed security." I studied his face, searching for signs of deception. "So you concocted this elaborate plan together? A three-way merger with you still in control of Parker?" Blake leaned forward, his expression earnest. "It wasn't my idea. It was Hayes's. He realized that destroying Parker would devalue the very assets he wanted to acquire. And he recognized that my client relationships were a key part of those assets. And Amber's pregnancy? Was that part of the plan too?" A flash of genuine emotion crossed his face. Pain, regret, something almost like shame. "No, that was unintended, but real." I stood, needing to move, to think. Blake's explanation was plausible, even likely. Michael Hayes was known for his tactical flexibility, his ability to pivot when circumstances changed. If Blake was telling the truth, Hayes had simply adapted to the new reality, finding a way to achieve his original goal through different means. "Even if what you're saying is true," I said carefully, "it doesn't change the fact that you're asking me to relinquish Meridian's controlling position in the acquisition. You're asking me to trust you again, professionally, if not personally." "I know. It's a lot to ask," Blake acknowledged. "But from a business perspective, the three-way merger makes sense, Liv. Meridian gets the capital it needs for global expansion. Parker keeps its client base and operational independence. Barrett gets the technology and manufacturing synergies it wants. Everyone wins. And personally? What about our divorce? Our daughter?" Blake's expression softened. "Those proceed as agreed. The business arrangements and our personal arrangements remain separate." I laughed without humor. "Nothing about this is separate, Blake. You've entangled our personal and professional lives so completely that I can't tell where one ends and the other begins." He stood, moving closer but careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Then let me simplify it. Say no to Hayes. Reject the three-way merger. Continue with your acquisition of Parker as planned." I blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "You heard me. If you don't trust that this is the right move for Meridian and for you, then don't do it. The SEC investigation will eventually clear me of the most serious charges. The merger with Barrett would accelerate everyone's plans, but it's not the only path forward." His apparent willingness to abandon the very proposal he'd supposedly orchestrated left me momentarily speechless. Either he was executing another level of manipulation, or... "Why?" I asked simply. Blake ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of genuine frustration or masterful acting, I couldn't be sure which. Because whatever you believe about my business ethics, I never intended to hurt you, Olivia. Not personally. The affair with Amber was a mistake, a series of mistakes, actually, compounded by cowardice and selfishness. But I never planned to use our marriage as leverage in a corporate negotiation. He took a deep breath, then continued. When you found us that day, when you told me about the baby, something broke in me. I knew I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. Everything that followed, the corporate maneuvering, the SEC investigation, even these negotiations with Hayes, they're all symptoms of a deeper failure. My failure. I wanted to believe him. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the hurt and the calculated corporate chess moves, a part of me wanted to believe that the man I'd married wasn't capable of such elaborate deception. If I say no, I said slowly, Hayes will release those messages. The SEC investigation will expand to include Meridian. The acquisition could fail entirely. Possibly, Blake acknowledged. Or we fight it. Together or separately, but we fight. And if I say yes, then we move forward with the three-way merger. You remain CEO of Meridian and take a seat on the parent company's board. I return to Parker in a reduced capacity, reporting to the new corporate structure. And Hayes gets what he wants without the messy public battle. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down. On me, this wasn't just about business strategy or corporate positioning. It was about trust, about values, about the kind of world I wanted my daughter to inherit. I need time to think, I said finally. Real time, not Hayes's arbitrary 24-hour deadline. Blake nodded. I understand, but Hayes won't wait. He'll move forward with his threat if you don't agree by tomorrow. Then let him, I said, a clarity suddenly emerging through the confusion. Let him release the messages. Let him expand the investigation. Let him do his worst. Blake stared at me, surprised by my sudden resolve. You'd risk everything? The acquisition, Meridian's reputation, your own position? What I won't risk is my integrity, I said firmly, or my daughter's future. If I agree to Hayes's terms, if I allow myself to be manipulated and blackmailed, what example am I setting? That expediency trumps ethics? That business success matters more than personal dignity? Olivia. No, Blake. I've spent weeks fighting to save my company, to secure my professional future. But in the process, I've compromised parts of myself I swore I never would. I've become calculating, suspicious, willing to use people's weaknesses against them, just like the corporate world taught me. I placed both hands on my stomach, feeling my daughter's reassuring movements. She deserves better. She deserves a mother who stands her ground, who faces threats with courage rather than capitulation. Blake was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, a small smile crossed his face. You know, that's exactly what my father would have said. What? Dad always told me that the true measure of a business leader wasn't what they achieved, but what they refused to sacrifice to achieve it. He shook his head ruefully. I never really understood that until now, watching you. Something in his expression, in the gentle respect of his tone, made me believe him, perhaps for the first time since this ordeal began. So what now? I asked. Blake straightened. Decision made. Now I go back to Hayes and withdraw my support for the three-way merger. Without me, his leverage is minimal. He'll still release the messages. Probably. But without my cooperation, they become just another salacious detail in an already complicated corporate saga. Meridian proceeds with the Parker acquisition as planned, and He paused, considering. I focus on becoming the kind of father our daughter deserves, even if I failed as a husband. As he prepared to leave, Blake hesitated at the door. For what it's worth, Olivia, I am sorry. Not just for the affair or the corporate games, but for not being the man you thought you married. I studied him, this complex man who had hurt me deeply, yet still managed moments of surprising integrity. Maybe the problem was that I never saw you clearly to begin with. I saw the man I wanted you to be. And now? Now I see you as you are. Flawed. Humans. Capable of both terrible mistakes and moments of real decency. It wasn't forgiveness, we were far beyond that, but it was something like understanding. As the door closed behind him, I felt lighter than I had in months, as if a decision I hadn't even realized I was struggling with had finally been made. Whatever happened tomorrow with Hayes, whatever challenges the SEC investigation might bring, I had found my North Star again, the values that would guide both my professional decisions and my personal life. The values I would pass on to my daughter. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in months, I was completely certain it was the right one. "Push, Olivia! Just one more big push!" Dr. Winter's voice felt distant through the haze of exhaustion and determination that had consumed me for the past 18 hours. Sweat matted my hair to my forehead as I gathered my remaining strength, gripping the sides of the hospital bed. "You're doing great," Eleanor encouraged from beside me, her usually composed demeanor replaced by fierce support. She'd been with me since my water broke unexpectedly during a board meeting, 3 weeks before my due date. With one final, monumental effort, I pushed. The pressure built, then suddenly released in a wave of relief as my daughter entered the world with a powerful cry that filled the delivery room. "She's here. She's beautiful, Olivia," Dr. Winters announced, lifting my squirming, red-faced daughter into view. Time seemed to slow as they placed her on my chest, this tiny human who had been my constant companion through the most tumultuous months of my life. Through corporate battles and personal betrayals, through negotiations and revelations, she had been there, growing, strengthening, preparing for this moment. "Hello, Sophia," I whispered, the name I'd chosen weeks ago finally, belonging to a real person. "I've been waiting to meet you." Sophia Grace Henderson, not Parker, blinked up at me with alert, dark blue eyes. Her tiny hand wrapped around my finger with surprising strength, as if making a promise. We would face whatever came next together. Eleanor wiped tears from her eyes, uncharacteristically emotional. "She's perfect, Olivia." As the nurses took Sophia for her initial checkup, I closed my eyes briefly, overwhelmed by both exhaustion and elation. The path to this moment had been nothing like I'd imagined when I first saw those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test nearly 8 months ago. In the 3 weeks since my confrontation with Blake and my decision to reject Hayes's manipulative proposal, my life had transformed yet again. True to his word, Blake had withdrawn his support for the 3-way merger. In retaliation, Hayes had released the communications between Blake and Amber, attempting to paint all of us as corporate schemers engaged in elaborate deception. But the business world had largely yawned in response. Corporate maneuvering, even when it involved personal drama, was hardly shocking. Without Blake's cooperation, Hayes had been forced to abandon his acquisition plans entirely. Barrett's stock had stabilized, though at a lower valuation than before. The Wall Street Journal had run a feature analyzing the failed merger, concluding that Hayes had overplayed his hand in a classic case of corporate hubris. The article had quoted an anonymous Barrett board member saying Hayes had become obsessed with beating Olivia Henderson at any cost, allowing personal animosity to cloud business judgment. 2 weeks later, Barrett announced Hayes was taking a leave of absence for personal reasons, corporate speak for a forced exit. Meridian's acquisition of Parker Industries had proceeded, though not without complications. The SEC investigation had expanded, as threatened, but our transparency and cooperation had mitigated the worst potential consequences. We'd agreed to a moderate fine and enhanced oversight of the integration process. The business press had dubbed it the most dramatic merger in tech history, a label that made me cringe whenever I saw it. Through it all, my pregnancy had progressed, my body changing as my professional life stabilized. The Meridian Board had voted unanimously to keep me as CEO despite my impending maternity leave. Eleanor would step in temporarily while I focused on Sophia's first months. "You've earned this time," Richard Caldwell had told me during our last board meeting before my leave began. The gruff chairman had become an unexpected ally through the acquisition process. "The company isn't going anywhere. Take these weeks. With your daughter, they're precious and you don't get them back." Coming from a man who'd famously postponed his own son's college graduation ceremony for a quarterly earnings call, the advice had been surprisingly heartfelt. A soft knock on the door pulled me from my reflections. Dr. Winters returned with Sophia, now swaddled in a hospital blanket. "Someone's eager to get back to Mom," she said with a smile, transferring my daughter to my waiting arms. "All her vitals are excellent, especially for being a bit early. She's a strong one." "Like her mother," Eleanor added, her usual corporate reserve completely dissolved by the tiny bundle in my arms. Dr. Winters checked my chart, then paused. "I know this is a sensitive question, but should we notify the father?" The question hung in the air. Blake and I had settled into an uneasy détente since our last conversation. Our divorce had been finalized 2 weeks ago, the proceedings, mercifully private despite the public attention on our companies. Per our agreement, he would have supervised visitation once Sophia was born, but we hadn't discussed the birth plan specifically. "Yes," I said after a moment. "He should know." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as she stepped out to make the call. I focused on Sophia, memorizing every feature of her perfect face. She had my dark hair and olive complexion, but something in the shape of her eyes and mouth reminded me of Blake. "Your life is going to be complicated, little one," I murmured, "but I promise to make it as full of love as possible." An hour later, as Sophia dozed in the bassinet beside my bed, there was another knock. Blake stood in the doorway, hesitant in a way I'd rarely seen him. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. I nodded, watching as he approached slowly, his eyes fixed on the sleeping newborn. He carried a small gift bag and what looked like a legal envelope. "She's beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She looks like you." "She has your eyes," I replied. "The shape, at least." Blake stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, clearly uncertain of his place in this room at this moment. Despite everything we'd been through, I felt a surprising pang of sympathy. The man who had once commanded boardrooms with effortless authority now seemed lost, humbled by this new life we'd created together. "Would you like to hold her?" I offered. Relief and gratitude washed over his face. "Are you sure?" "She's your daughter too, Blake." He set down the items he'd brought and carefully lifted Sophia from her bassinet. His confident executive demeanor melted away as he cradled her, revealing the vulnerability of a first-time father. Sophia stirred briefly, then settled against his chest, completely unaware of the complicated history between her parents. "Hello, Sophia," he whispered. "I'm your dad." Watching them together, this man who had hurt me so deeply now holding our daughter with such tender care, I felt the last remnants of anger begin to dissolve. Not into forgiveness, exactly, but into something like acceptance. We would always be connected through this perfect little human, regardless of what had transpired between us. After a few minutes, Blake reluctantly returned Sophia to her bassinet. He retrieved the gift bag and placed it on the bedside table. "Just a few things for her," he explained. "Nothing extravagant. I thought something simple might be better." I appreciated the restraint. The old Blake might have shown up with something ostentatious, more about impressing me than benefiting our daughter. I opened the bag to find a soft, handmade blanket and a small silver rattle. Beneath them was a children's book, Goodnight Moon, with an inscription inside. To Sophia, may you always reach for the stars. Love, Dad. The simplicity and thoughtfulness of the gifts touched me more than any expensive jewelry or designer baby clothes could have. This was a Blake I hadn't seen in years. Perhaps a Blake I had never truly known. He hesitated, then handed me the legal envelope. And this is for you, or rather, for both of you. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a trust document establishing a college fund for Sophia, along with an amendment to our custody agreement. I scanned the latter, my eyes widening as I realized what it contained. You're waiving the supervised visitation requirement? I asked, surprised. Blake nodded. After our last conversation, I did some serious thinking about the kind of father I want to be, about trust. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of genuine nervousness. I realized that if I want you to trust me with our daughter, I need to demonstrate that I trust your judgment. I don't understand. You know what's best for Sophia, he said simply. If you believe supervision is necessary at any point, I'll accept that. No legal battles, no manipulation. Just honest communication between co-parents. The gesture was unexpected, a surrender of legal leverage in favor of cooperative parenting. It represented a shift in Blake's approach that I wouldn't have believed possible months ago. Thank you, I said quietly. That means a lot. He nodded, clearly emotional but working to maintain composure. There's something else I wanted to tell you. I've accepted a position with a startup incubator in Austin. I'll be mentoring young entrepreneurs, helping them avoid the mistakes I made. You're leaving New York? This was surprising news. Blake had always been adamant about building his career in the city, following his father's footsteps. Yes, I think it's for the best. For all of us. He glanced at Sophia. I'll come back regularly for visitation, of course, but this way there's some space. For you to lead the merged companies without my shadow lingering. For me to figure out who I am outside of Parker Industries. He smiled wryly. For the business press to find something new to write about. I couldn't help but smile at that. Our corporate drama had dominated the financial news for months, with every development scrutinized and often sensationalized. The prospect of that spotlight dimming was appealing. When do you leave? Next week. Amber is already there, setting up our new place. I raised an eyebrow. You're still together? Blake nodded, a complicated expression crossing his face. We're trying. It's not simple. The circumstances of our relationship were problematic from the start, and we both know it. But with her pregnancy, with everything that's happened, we want to give it an honest attempt. And her work? She was your executive assistant. What will she do in Austin? She's starting her own consulting firm, actually. She has a business degree from NYU that she never really got to use at Parker. He shrugged slightly. Turns out she has good instincts. She was the one who warned me Hayes couldn't be trusted, months before everything imploded. The irony wasn't lost on me that Amber might have been a more astute judge of character than the man who'd built his career on strategic partnerships. I hope it works out, I said, surprised to find I meant it. Really? Blake looked skeptical. Really? Whatever happens between us, Sophia and Amber's baby will be half-siblings. I'd rather they grow up with parents who are at peace with each other. Blake's eyes glistened slightly. You're a better person than I deserved, Olivia. It's not about deserving, I replied. It's about choosing the future over the past. He nodded, understanding. After a brief silence, he glanced at his watch. I should go. You need rest, and I've imposed enough. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Blake, thank you for coming. It means something that you were here today. He smiled, a genuine smile without calculation or charm, just simple human connection. Wouldn't have missed it. She's my daughter, too. After he left, I gazed at Sophia, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she slept. The encounter with Blake had been surprisingly healing, offering a glimpse of what our co-parenting relationship might become. Respectful, cooperative, focused on Sophia's well-being rather than our own hurt feelings. Eleanor returned with a nurse, who helped me get settled for the night. As Eleanor prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "For what it's worth," she said, "I was wrong about Blake. When all this started, I thought he was irredeemable. But people can surprise you." "They can," I agreed. "Sometimes even themselves." The next morning brought a flurry of visitors, colleagues from Meridian bearing flowers and teddy bears, a few close friends offering practical help and emotional support. Vanessa Chen, our CFO, arrived with a stack of financial reports, just in case you get bored, and promptly burst into tears when she held Sophia, her tough exterior crumbling in the face of 7 pounds of newborn perfection. Marcus Webb from legal came with his wife, both of them cooing over Sophia with the expertise of parents to 3 young children. "The first one changes everything," Marcus advised. "The second one just confirms you'll never sleep normally again." David Russo, Blake's father's old friend from the Parker board, arrived mid-afternoon with a handmade quilt and tears in his eyes. "James would have been so proud," he said, referring to Blake's father. "Not just of this beautiful granddaughter, but of how you've handled everything, Olivia. You've shown tremendous grace under pressure." His words touched me deeply. Throughout the corporate battle, I'd sometimes wondered what Blake's father would have thought of it all. He had been a kind man, principled in business and warm in personal relationships. The kind of person I hoped Sophia would know through stories, even if she'd never meet him. "I've been thinking about stepping down from the board," David continued, gently rocking Sophia. "I'm not getting any younger, and the merger seems like a natural transition point." "We'd hate to lose your wisdom," I said sincerely. David's institutional knowledge of Parker Industries had been invaluable during the integration planning. He smiled. "Well, perhaps I could stay on as an advisor, particularly for the legacy client relationships. Those took decades to build." "We'd welcome that," I assured him. It was a good solution, maintaining his connection to the company his friend had built while acknowledging the changing landscape. As the day wound down and visitors departed, I found myself alone with my daughter for the first time since her birth. The hospital room was quiet, golden evening light filtering through the windows. Sophia was awake, her eyes curious and alert as I held her close. "It's just you and me now, little one," I whispered. "Well, not entirely. You have your dad and Eleanor and a whole community of people who already love you. But this moment? This is ours." I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the pain of Blake's betrayal, the corporate machinations, the difficult choices and painful truths. None of it had been what I expected when I first saw those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. Yet somehow, all of it had led to this perfect moment with my daughter. The business world awaited my return, of course. The merged Meridian Parker enterprise was still finding its footing, the integration presenting new challenges daily. Eleanor was handling things capably in my absence, but decisions would eventually require my input. The SEC Oversight Committee would need regular updates. Investors would want reassurances. But for now, none of that mattered. For these precious weeks of maternity leave, my priority was clear and singular: this tiny human who depended on me completely. My maternity leave passed in a blur of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and moments of breathtaking joy. Each day brought new discoveries: Sophia's first real smile, the way her eyes tracked movement with growing focus, the unique cry that meant she was hungry versus tired. The corporate battlefield that had consumed my life for months faded to background noise. Blake visited regularly, tentative at first, then with growing confidence as he learned to decipher Sophia's needs. We developed a rhythm of cordial, child-centered interactions. Neither friends nor enemies, but co-parents united in our love for our daughter. Tom, the security guard whose access to Blake's server had started the chain of events leading to the merger, sent a hand-carved wooden mobile for Sophia's crib. He'd landed on his feet with a better-paying position as head of security for a financial firm downtown. His note read simply, "Sometimes things fall apart, so better things can fall together." 6 weeks later, I stood in my home office, preparing for my first day back at work. Sophia slept peacefully in the bassinet I'd set up beside my desk, allowing me to keep her close while I reviewed the stack of documents Eleanor had sent over. The merger was proceeding better than expected. Parker's client relationships remained stable, thanks in part to Blake's graceful exit and public support for the new corporate structure. Our stock price had rebounded strongly, and the SEC had expressed satisfaction with our compliance efforts. Michael Hayes had been formally removed as CEO of Barrett Industries, the board finally acknowledging what many had suspected: his fixation on acquiring Parker had clouded his judgment and cost the company millions. Barrett had pivoted toward acquisitions in the healthcare sector, moving away from direct competition with our newly merged entity. The business press had finally tired of our story, moving on to fresher corporate dramas. And Blake, true to his word, had relocated to Austin, maintaining regular video calls with Sophia and visiting every other weekend. Amber had given birth to a boy, Jackson, just 2 weeks after Sophia was born. Blake had sent a photo of him holding both babies, one in each arm, his expression a mixture of pride and lingering disbelief at the unexpected direction his life had taken. I'd surprised myself by feeling genuinely happy for him, not because I still harbored feelings for Blake, but because I believed every child deserves a present, engaged father. My phone chimed with a text from my new nanny, confirming she would arrive at 8 to care for Sophia while I attended my first board meeting as CEO of the merged entity. I'd interviewed dozens of candidates before finding Sandra, a warm, experienced caregiver whose presence put both Sophia and me at ease. As I finished dressing, choosing a power suit that accommodated my still-changing postpartum body, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was different from the one who had discovered her husband's betrayal 8 months ago. There was a new confidence in her posture, a clarity in her gaze, a hard-won wisdom in the lines around her eyes. That woman had been blindsided by betrayal, her personal and professional worlds collapsing simultaneously. This woman had rebuilt both, creating something stronger and more authentic from the ruins. Sophia stirred, her little sounds pulling me from my reflection. I lifted her gently, breathing in her sweet baby scent. "Ready for a new adventure, little one?" I whispered. "Mommy's going back to work today. There will be challenges, of course. Days when balancing motherhood and career feels impossible. Moments when the past creeps back in with its doubts and regrets." I kissed her forehead, feeling her warmth against my lips. "But we'll face it all together, and we'll remember what we learned from all of this, that endings can become beginnings, that betrayal can lead to strength, that sometimes the path forward requires letting go of what you thought you wanted to embrace what you truly need." The board meeting that morning was both a homecoming and a new beginning. The conference room contained both familiar Meridian faces and newer Parker executives, all working together toward a shared vision. As I presented the integration progress, report, and our strategy for the coming year, I felt a sense of purpose stronger than anything I'd experienced before. This wasn't just about corporate success anymore. It was about building something that mattered, something that would make Sophia proud one day. After the meeting, Richard Caldwell pulled me aside. "Impressive presentation," he said, his usual gruffness softened by genuine respect. "The board is unanimously behind your leadership, but more importantly, how's motherhood treating you?" The question was so unexpected from the hard-nosed chairman that I laughed. "It's the most exhausting, terrifying, wonderful experience of my life." He nodded sagely. "My biggest regret is how much I missed my own children. Don't make the same mistake, Olivia. The company will be here regardless." coming from the man who had built Meridian from the ground up, who had once been notorious for his around-the-clock work ethic. The advice carried particular weight. 3 months later, I sat in a sunny cafe in Austin, watching Blake interact with Sophia. At 6 months old, she was increasingly animated, babbling and reaching for everything within grasp. Blake was a natural father, attentive and patient, in ways that occasionally surprised me given his former corporate intensity. Beside him sat Amber, more relaxed than I'd ever seen her, with baby Jackson asleep in a carrier. The initial awkwardness of our first meeting, this unprecedented situation of ex-wife, mistress-turned-girlfriend, and their respective children, had gradually given way to something resembling civil cooperation. "How's the mentorship program going?" I asked Blake as Sophia contentedly examined a teething toy. "Better than expected," he replied. "These young entrepreneurs are hungry for guidance, but not in the way I anticipated. They don't just want business strategy. They want to know how to build companies that reflect their values." "And what do you tell them?" Blake's expression turned thoughtful. "I tell them about Parker Industries, both what my father did right and where I went wrong. I tell them that success without integrity isn't really success at all." He glanced at Sophia. "And I tell them that what looks like failure sometimes turns out to be an unexpected path to something better." Amber shifted Jackson to her shoulder, patting his back gently. "The consulting firm is taking off," she offered. "Turns out there's a market for helping traditional companies understand millennial consumers without condescension." The conversation flowed more easily than I would have thought possible a year ago. We weren't friends. Too much history stood between us for that. But we were finding a way forward that put the children first. The shared custody arrangements were working smoothly, with Blake flying to New York for his weekends with Sophia, gradually transitioning to longer visits as she grew. Back in New York, the merged company was thriving. We'd expanded into new markets, developed cutting-edge products, and built a corporate culture that emphasized both innovation and ethics. The story of how the merger came about had even become something of a business school case study. The Henderson strategy, turning personal crisis into professional opportunity. I'd been asked to speak at several women's leadership conferences, sharing my experience navigating corporate politics while pregnant and newly single. While I kept the most painful personal details private, I was open about the challenges of rebuilding both a career and a life simultaneously. The hardest lesson, I told one particularly engaged audience of young female executives, was learning that vulnerability isn't weakness. For years, I thought success meant never showing cracks in my armor. Now I know that real strength comes from acknowledging our wounds and growing through them, not despite them. One evening, as Sophia's first birthday approached, I sat in the nursery rocking her to sleep. The moonlight cast gentle shadows across her peaceful face, so trusting and content. In that quiet moment, I felt a profound gratitude for everything, even the painful parts, that had brought us here. The betrayal that once seemed world-ending had become just one chapter in a much larger story. A necessary disruption that had forced me to confront truths I'd been avoiding, to claim power I didn't know I possessed, to build a life aligned with my authentic self rather than external expectations. "You know what, little one?" I whispered to my sleeping daughter. "Sometimes the things that hurt us most lead us exactly where we need to be." The merged company, now simply called Meridian Technologies, continued its upward trajectory. The following year, we expanded internationally, opening offices in London, Singapore, and Toronto. I made a point of balancing my executive responsibilities with genuine presence in Sophia's life, bringing her with me on business trips when possible and structuring my schedule around her key milestones. Blake remained in Austin, building a reputation as both a mentor to tech entrepreneurs and an advocate for corporate ethics. Our co-parenting relationship evolved into something respectful and functional, if never quite warm. His relationship with Amber ended amicably when Jackson was 2, but they maintained a cooperative approach to raising their son. The children grew to know each other as siblings, spending holidays and special occasions together despite the complex circumstances of their births. 5 years after that fateful day when I discovered Blake with Amber, I stood at a podium accepting the Business Leader of the Year award. Sophia, now in kindergarten, watched proudly from the audience, seated between Eleanor and my new partner, Daniel, a kind, steady architect I'd met through a mutual friend. Blake sat a few rows back with Jackson, having flown in specifically for the ceremony. Leadership isn't about avoiding mistakes, I told the audience during my acceptance speech. It's about how we respond when those mistakes inevitably occur. It's about having the courage to rebuild, to transform, to grow stronger through adversity. I glanced at my daughter, at the complex constellation of people who had become her extended family, at the life we'd all created from the wreckage of what came before. 5 years ago, I thought I was facing an ending. Today, I recognize it was simply the beginning of a better story. Later that evening, at the reception, Blake approached me with a glass of champagne. "Congratulations, Olivia. You deserve it." "Thank you," I replied sincerely. "None of this would have happened if I hadn't been a complete idiot?" He finished with a self-deprecating smile. I laughed. "I was going to say if circumstances had been different, but your version works too." For a moment, we stood in comfortable silence, watching our children play together near the dessert table. 2 siblings with different mothers, navigating their unusual family structure with the adaptability only children possess. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if I hadn't walked into your office that day?" I asked suddenly. Blake considered this seriously. "I wonder that more often than you might think. But the truth is, we were already broken, Liv. We just hadn't admitted it yet." I nodded, knowing he was right. The betrayal had been a symptom, not the disease itself. "Well, for what it's worth, I think we're both better people now than we were then." "Definitely," he agreed, though I had to lose everything to figure that out. "Not everything," I said, gesturing toward Jackson. "Some things you gained along the way." As I rejoined Daniel and Sophia, I felt a sense of completion. The circle that had begun with betrayal had somehow transformed into something whole. Not perfect, certainly not what I would have chosen, but real and rich with meaning nonetheless. That night, as I tucked Sophia into bed, she asked the question I'd known would eventually come. "Mommy, why don't you and Daddy live together like Emma's parents?" I sat on the edge of her bed, choosing my words carefully. "Sometimes, sweetie, people love each other but can't live together anymore. Your daddy and I realized we were better parents when we weren't married." "But you're not mad at each other?" Her small face was serious, processing this adult complexity. "No, we're not mad. We both love you very much, and we've learned how to be friends because of you." She nodded, satisfied with this explanation for now. Someday, when she was older, there would be more difficult conversations, more nuanced understandings. But for tonight, this simple truth was enough. As I closed her bedroom door, I thought about the long, complicated journey that had brought me here. A journey that began with tears on a bathroom floor as I stared at a positive pregnancy test, continued through corporate boardrooms and legal negotiations, and led somehow to this moment of deep contentment. The woman who had walked in on her husband and his secretary that day would never have imagined this future. She couldn't have conceived of the strength she would find, the success she would build, the joy she would discover. Life rarely follows the path we expect. Sometimes it detours through heartbreak and betrayal, through challenges that seem insurmountable in the moment. But if we're brave enough to keep moving forward, to make conscious choices rather than simply react, those detours can lead to destinations far more meaningful than our original route. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Just checking in. Both my girls okay?" I smiled, typing back, "Perfect. See you tomorrow." 8 years ago, I had believed my story was about betrayal, about being left, discarded, replaced. Now I understood it had always been about something else entirely. About finding my own path. About creating a life defined by my choices rather than someone else's actions. It wasn't the story I'd planned to write, but it was mine, authentically and completely. And I wouldn't change a word. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.